I'm really excited about the victory we got on Saturday. It was a hard fought win, and it wasn't perfect by any means. Really felt like our guys stayed in the fight, believed in each other, and came out in the second half and really did the things that we talked about at halftime. Put some points on the board, and obviously keeping them off the scoreboard by and large. Our conditioning really held up, so we're really pleased with that. It was a very hot day in Portland. I'm sure it was 90 plus on the turf. So a lot to build off of, a lot to be excited about, but a lot to correct too. So we're on to Northern Colorado now, and excited about coming back home and playing in front of a packed crowd again at Bobcat Stadium. So with that, I'll open it up.
What are some of the things that have stood out to you after watching film from Saturday's game?
Well, I think first off, Portland State's quarterback, Davis Alexander, is a really good player. And we knew that going in. We knew that he would be tough to contend with. He made his fair share of plays, and fortunately, down the stretch, we were able to corral him. So that was the first thing. I think we felt like their defensive scheme would challenge us, and we couldn't quite gain the momentum offensively to stay on the field in the first half enough, but figured out some things. And, just like I said, Davis Alexander's a really good player. Isaiah Alphonse is a really good player too. And getting him to the second level was the key. And obviously he had a tremendous game. And we really needed that. And he carried the lion's share of the attempts for us. And ultimately that'll have to be divvied out a little bit more, I think, as the season goes along.
Did you feel that if you kept running into that flex, that eventually it would start to bend a little bit, you could get that second level? Was that the mentality in the second half? Yeah,
and it was, to some degree, it was finding schematically how we wanted to attack it, and it was probably more running at it than trying to get outside. We had some success outside, but we had more success probably between the tackles. And honestly, I think our guys kind of seeing it and sorting through it and, trusting, I guess, the calls and what we were doing was probably the biggest thing. It's going to take some time to play through that for anybody, and you got to kind of stick to it. And fortunately, we went into halftime just down one, and we're really able to stick to the plan. And, it really opened up the running game in the second half.
Was there a lineman or a couple linemen that stood out the most on the offense?
Not necessarily. I think, for us it was a collective effort. I think that kind of defense poses challenges for offensive linemen when you're moving guys every which way, and you don't necessarily know where they're going to be. They're going to be once you snap the football, and if they're down guys, if they're stand-up guys, it's quite a variety for that group. So I think they all had their level of success, and they probably all had the things that we can certainly clean up as a group.
And Cole Samuels, I forget if you mentioned that he played at right guard in place of 2 weeks.
Yep.
What was kind of the thinking behind that, and how much will that be?
Well, Cole's healthy again. He had gotten healthy right prior to the Wyoming game, so he was going to figure into the rotation a little bit that week. It was really the same thought process going into Portland State, and whether it's at guard or center, he provides us depth and honestly provides us competition. So I think we'll continue to work Cole into set rotations, and how many plays per game that'll I don't necessarily know, but he'll certainly figure into some playing time.
Was Tui just getting a blow? Was that?
Yeah, I believe so. I can't even recall when that happened, but we had some guys get tired. It was a test that day for our conditioning, for our mental toughness, and I think we passed. But it was good. There was a set rotation for Cole to get in the first half, and that's when he figured in at center, and then he went in at guard a little bit in the second half to give Taylor a blow.
What have you thought about the boost that Jahari Martin has continued to give and him rising to the occasion? Yeah,
really pleased. He's a tailback by trade, but he's a powerful individual, and I know with RJ as our fullback, in fall camp, I we felt like if RJ were to go down, Jahari would be the next guy up, but he was really still just a tailback by and large through spring ball and fall camp. So it's really been a little bit of on the job training the last couple weeks, following RJ's injury. Certainly in that game when RJ went down, Jahari hadn't got a lot of fullback preparation that week, got more the last couple weeks, and then ultimately the game plan took a turn where we played with a fullback quite a bit in that game, and he got a lot of run, and he's again learning on the fly, and in particular for a defense like that where you don't have static defenders. You have defenders coming from all different angles. Was pleased with his efforts, and he's been a impactful player on special teams as well, and he's got that attitude. Whatever I can do to help the team, whatever I can do to get on the field to help the team, and those are the type of guys we need in this program.
On top of it being hot on the field, it was a little quieter of an atmosphere, and some of the players commented on that from a coaching perspective. Does that affect you guys at all when you start, or not?
You know what? It can't, ultimately. We knew going in it wasn't going to be the atmosphere that we played in the first 3 games. And whether it's all we can control is our preparation, I guess. And are we prepared? And if our guys need to entirely feed off of what the crowd brings, we're not where we need to be. But playing in that environment sheds some light on it, I guess. I think more than anything, Portland State created a little bit of momentum right away. They didn't score that first drive, but they moved the football. We were 3 and out, then they moved the football again, and that was kind of the way the first half went. So, and I don't think that was because we weren't prepared. They made some plays we didn't, and before you know it, they have momentum on their side. And I thought our guys ultimately worked through that, and it wasn't it wasn't a terrible atmosphere there. I can't imagine if there was 2,000 people there, but it was, we had some fans there, they had some fans there. So, that's going to be the nature of some of the venues we play in, and we got to be prepared to play in them and come out of the gates as hot as we can.
Do you think maybe some of that was just inevitable, having it be two blowouts in a row and playing 2 games at home?
Again, same thing. It can't be. If we're getting too caught up into reading our clippings or looking at scores and trying to rationalize how our next opponent is, we're caught up in the wrong things. I think we were well aware that Portland State was dangerous. I think we were well aware that we were far from perfect in those previous couple games. But, as you grow and learn about your team, they're not all seasoned vets. And we got plenty of guys that are going through this for the first time. So I think it was a tremendous learning opportunity for our team, for our leaders to continue to emerge and step up, because we have to be prepared to play, anywhere against anybody at any time. That's got to be our mindset. And that was a step forward at kind of working through that on Saturday.
Is there anything you could pinpoint or sum up as far as penalties and why there were more in this game than?
Yeah, we got 4, unsportsmanlike personal fouls, and that's I think very uncharacteristic. And the guys that got them, I would say, are good team players. I think we got caught up in the emotions a little bit on a couple of them. A couple of them were the reactive nature, which the reactor typically is the one that does get caught. And then we got double on the touchdown when we went up 13 points, or we went up 12. And, I do think across football there's a heightened sense of, calling penalties for taunting and talking and those type of things. It's NFL on down. And, it's important our guys understand that. That whole drive, as we were pushing the ball down the field, and it was physical, there was a lot going on, and our guys have to learn, talk with your pads, get back to the huddle, go do it again, and we didn't do a very good job of that. So again, like a lot of things within that game, we need to learn from it and grow and not see that type. We had 7 penalties and 4 of them were of that nature, and all were impactful you take 15 yards times 4, you take 2 times 15, you get to kick from the 10. Those are all bad situations for us.
And the holding penalty and even false start, the other ones,
Yeah,
that's simple to make.
yeah, the 2 holds were bad plays. I mean, they negated gains in both cases. I think they would both be classified as technical mistakes, I think, in both cases. So, yeah, I think it's a deal. The offsides, you're going to get a few of those. You're going to get a few unforced. The holds, kind of the ebbs and flows of getting holds, kind of goes with the crew sometimes. But, our penalties were all warranted, ill-timed, and we got to be more disciplined. I guess that's the bottom line.
Obviously Monday, but anything stand out to you about Northern Colorado coming up this week?
Well, they're coming off a big win, and they back-to-back overtime games. Finding a way to win against a team that had just come off of beating an FBS team. I think that was a big win for them. And they're a program that they hired a coach in the offseason last year and didn't get a chance to play. So they're really, I'm certain, still creating their identity and getting, I don't know if that's a signature win, but getting a big sky win like that, certainly is one to create some momentum with. And they have several transfers from a lot of different programs. So they're a lot different than they would have been in 19. To even think anything resembles what they were in 19 would be a real mistake. And Coach McCaffrey brings a wealth of experience from his playing days, his coaching days at Valor Christian. He's got his son, who played in the Big Ten, playing for him at quarterback. They got some really explosive players on offense, running backs, receivers, and they got some really skilled guys on defense. So, we could look at their scores, line them up, look at their stats, and say whatever. But they're coming off a big win, and we gotta be prepared for their best shot.
Scheme-wise, what are they more conventional than PSU? Similar?
I'd say more traditional on offense. Mix of being under center and play action. Try to get the running game going. Not as pass heavy maybe as Portland State was. Not as dependent on their quarterback to make plays. However, Dylan can make a bunch of plays with his arm in particular. Really good running back. A couple of those transfers are at the receiver position. Really good size guys. So. Yeah, more traditional in their sets, trying to get one-on-ones with those big receivers. Defensively, it's a 3-3 stack defense, one that we probably won't see the rest of the year. So a little bit of an anomaly again from a defensive perspective. It's a defensive system that's come along the last couple of years. Started I think A&M. Iowa State runs it. We saw it at Wyoming, both with Tulsa and Texas State. So it's becoming more and more of a defense that can really slow down the pass because you're dropping 8 in the coverage quite a bit, but you're deployed enough to stop the run by the way they set. So, it'll be the way the season goes. You shift gears schematically week to week. That's just the way things work, and we've already done that starting here on Monday. So.
Would you characterize that 3-3-5 as a big nickel, or do they play more of a rover safety, or what does that secondary look like in that scheme?
They're secondary play, more safeties, but it's got an unusual flavor to it. When it's probably the one time in 11 games you'll see it. I think that's the biggest thing. And that year at Wyoming in 19, we saw it 2 out of 3 weeks. So. I'd have personally a little bit of experience. I know Coach Hauswright does. They played Iowa State last year when he was at Oregon. So there's a little bit of history, but they all got their different spin on it. So, they're really active with their front 5, really good players. And then secondary wise, they're deployed and they play a lot of zone. So you have to be. You have to be patient, take what they give you. That's really, it's really a bend but don't break type of philosophy.
And Matt seems to have continued to be patient with the football, with 1 turnover this weekend. But what have you liked about that, and how important will that be this weekend?
Well, I think his productivity, completing the football, not turning it over, getting our playmakers involved has to continue and has to continue to improve. I thought he didn't start super fast by any means, but he stayed with it. Made some throws in particular in the second half to Lance that helped us open up the game. He's going to have to play well for us to win and understand that he doesn't have to do it all himself. I think that's, as he grows in his experience level, I think that's where I do feel like, okay, I can lean on some guys. I can certainly hand the ball off to Isaiah, and that looks good from time to time. I can find Lance. We have to be able to get Willie a little bit more involved, certainly in the passing game. It was good to see Jaden get a catch in the 2-minute. Our tight ends had a couple opportunities. So, Matt's continued growth as we go through the conference season will be huge.
What do you think? Is Lance just a really good route runner? What are the best skills, I guess, as a receiver?
Well, I think first off, he catches the ball real well, but then he's got good size. He's strong. He doesn't have amazing size, but he's good size for a receiver, and he's got, I think, above average strength for sure. And he runs well enough, and it was running good routes. So, he can separate in a lot of different ways, and then if it is a 50-50 ball, I think he's proven he can catch it. So that's a lot of skills that you're looking for, a lot of attributes you're looking for in a receiver, and I think he's playing extremely confident right now, and I think Matt's extremely confident in him, and that's that kind of relationship you want to have between your quarterback and your leading receiver.
How surprising was it that one of the only miscommunications of the year was on that pick, and it was with Lance?
Well, it's not the first time that's happened. It's we have a read element on some routes, and that was Matt was wrong there, Lance was right. We had a couple of those against Wyoming, so something we got to eliminate. We got to be able to see coverage the same way to be able to throw the ball where we need to throw it, and it'll be something we continue to work on.
I imagine that kind of speaks a lot of trust in your quarterback to be able to have that kind of read element.
Yeah, I think so. Matt's he's very diligent in studying coverage, and when we feel like we can take advantage, and then we'll go down that route to allow those reads to occur. And if we don't feel like they can present themselves, we won't. But he's certainly earned the right, and I think on the flip side, our receivers have to get those calls in games, and we've executed pretty well.
In studying film with Matt, what are some things you really want him to pick up on when he's in the film room that you see?
Well, I think just generally with quarterbacks, from one opponent to the next, you need to be able to shift gears. You're used to seeing your own defense for that extended period of time between spring and fall, and that's lays a foundation. But you go week to week now, it's trying to identify what are the keys to their coverage. Which defender is going to be the key to, I guess, give it away or tip the coverage as much as possible. Sometimes it's alignment, sometimes it's technique, sometimes it's their eyes. Within coverage, if it's a heavy man team, who would you prefer to go after? And then I think if it's a heavy blitz team, a pressure team, obviously understanding, the do's and don'ts as far as our pressure goes. I think those are the biggest components, is understanding coverage and understanding pressure, and then we ask him to do a fair amount in the run game, and that becomes kind of that third component, how much we can go forward in the run game as far as him making decisions.
Any update on Coy, James, and other injuries?
Coy suffered a serious injury, and he'll be out for an extended period of time. James, we're hopeful that there'll be a return at some point. I don't know it'll be this week, but I think we're good reason to think we'll get him back. RJ's on the mend. He's not too far off, and Kendrick Bailey's on the mend. He's not too far off. Nolan is out. I think we've talked about that. Kyle had his surgery. He's doing well. So I think that's the updates right now. I know Tyrell, we've worked back into practice for a week and feel good about his progress there, and didn't need him in the game. But I imagine we'll see him moving forward.
Simeon, Tyrell, are they going to be likely to get most of the reps then this week?
Yeah, I think Simeon's really played well and earned the right to be on the field more and more. And I think, Eric Zambrano's played solid football. We've been playing three corners along with James, and now Tyrell, plugging him in there will probably be a similar look as far as how we, rotate through.
Coulter, do you have anything?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sure.
A couple for you. Following up just on Lance, it's sort of cool that you got a guy that is from Bozeman. So does that come with extra pressure, though? I mean, what do you think of his ability to sort of handle being the hometown guy? Because sometimes that could be, distraction is the wrong word, but it could just be extra.
Yeah, I'd imagine it is, in particular when a guy's young. I think Lance, being a fifth-year guy, I think he's beyond that. I think he's waited in the wings for this opportunity. And I think his confidence in his own abilities and our confidence in him, honestly, would override any sense of expectations that are going to bring him down. I think he's waited for, a couple years behind some, really from an opportunity perspective, behind a couple guys. He's been on the field, but, it was apparent from the time I got the job back in February that he saw himself making the plays and making the contribution he is right now. And it was easy for us to see early, between the workouts we did in the winter and then spring ball that he was going to be capable of becoming the guy that he has so far.
That group's interesting because not only did those guys have to do so much more blocking because it was such a run-heavy offense, but also a lot of those guys were kind of stuck behind two of the more talented guys Montana State's had in a long time, in Travis Johnson and Kevin Cassis. So do you sort of see a revitalized energy in them, or how do you think they've reacted to just getting more opportunities, being more involved in the offense as a whole?
Well, I think first off, they understand that it's an every play deal. I think that's the residual of maybe the things they were asked to do before. Our guys need to, not only run routes and catch the ball, but they need to block, and that's certainly continued. I think, whether it's Lance wanting to seize this opportunity, if it's Willie getting back on the field after all the hardship that he's had staying on the field, and then some of the younger guys, Jaden hadn't really had a chance to get on the field a whole lot. We bring Cam Gardner into the mix. Coy, unfortunate that he got hurt, but he's willing to do whatever, and that showed I think throughout his career here. So yeah, I think receivers want to be involved, they want to get the ball, but I think we set the tone that it's got to be a unselfish group that's willing to do whatever they're asked, and keep getting better. You'll be rewarded on the other side, and I know it does help the more times that the ball's getting thrown for sure.
I know I touched on this with you at the Big Sky kickoff. I wanted to follow up with you just because we've seen the impact it can have already just 1 week into league play, and that's when it comes to explosive returns. You guys had one. Coy had one on Saturday, but I think there was 3 kick returns for touchdowns on the opening weekend of Big Sky Conference play. How much can that impact the momentum of a game, but also then how high of a priority do you put on kick coverages and things like that to sort of mitigate those explosive plays from your opponent?
Well, they are certainly big plays, and I'll talk about the coverage aspect first. We have to be able to keep those at a minimum, and kickoff cover-wise, we've done an awesome job at this point, forced a lot of fair catches. Blake's kicked the ball fairly well 4 games in. Punt coverage-wise, we let one, get to, I think, a 14-yarder right away. So that's a huge priority, and also where Bryce kicks the ball directionally and hang time and distance is really important. I know creating returns on our end, that was the first game we've been able to get any kickoff returns, and we were honestly disappointed with our production there. So we need to improve upon those opportunities. I do, in the punt game, it has shown up where we've had some impactful plays, and that was huge. That sequence right after half, we'd moved the ball a little bit on offense. pinned them. So Bryce had a good kick, went 3 and out, and that created that opportunity for that catch at midfield for Coy, and I think we got inside the 20, tagged on a penalty. We were sitting there at the 9, and that little sequence of offense to punt to defense to punt return, flipped the fortunes of the game, ultimately with the return that Coy had. So, we got to be able to limit them, and we got to be able to create them at times, and we're working real hard schematically on both sides of football. And I think we have a group of guys with a real desire and understanding how important those plays are. But I don't think we're the only team in the Big Sky that thinks that way. So, it'll be important each week that we create momentum in the special teams game, and we certainly don't allow it to be created on the other side.
I know you don't necessarily specifically recruit a guy because he's a kick returner, probably wants to play a different position too, but those abilities are pretty apparent, especially from in that element from a young age. So, but do you feel like there's guys that land at the FCS level and in the Big Sky that maybe have superior talent in that specific element of the game?
That's an interesting thought. I think it can happen that way because, in particular, I'd say in the punt return game, punt returning doesn't always correlate to big-time receiving skills necessarily. And to some degree, I would say the kickoff is the same way. So guys can slip through the cracks they're elusive. They're maybe quicker than they are fast, and that's what a punt returner really needs to be. Sometimes a kick returner is more about a guy that can just hit it and go. But I think there's some real good insight in that thought because at the as you higher up you go, you're probably looking at speed, and sometimes that, those guys that are very elusive but maybe don't have that top end speed are looked over, and those a lot of times are the guys with really excellent return skills.
Last one for me. You mentioned Dylan McCaffrey, the quarterback from Northern Colorado, and there's been in recent years guys that were 3-4 star recruits that have landed in the Big Sky and in the FCS as well. But, he's a little different than that, even as a guy that was, a top 100 player coming out of high school, a top 10 quarterback in the entire country, in Michigan and all that. So do you see that talent level? Do you see him on film? And what sort of impact do you think that potential could have in the league long term?
Yeah, he's talented, and we didn't have a shot to recruit him at Wyoming, but with the proximity to Denver, I was very familiar with Dylan. And in going to Michigan, that was warranted by his high school career. I know Michigan's played a bunch of guys at quarterback the last several years. It's been a little bit of a revolving door, but he was on the field a bunch, and I think he's a guy that has football in his blood, obviously, and has athleticism in his bloodlines. His brothers, his dad, his mom, I know one of his grandfathers, I think, was an Olympic champion, or Olympian at least. So there's a lot to be said for him just growing up around sports and competition, and then, having been coached by his dad, and then now being coached again by his dad and his older brother. What a unique situation. Max is the offensive coordinator, and so it's early in this whole transition for them. But Dylan's got a whole bunch of talent. I think he's more of a passer than a runner, but he's more than capable of making some plays with his athleticism, and he's got some really good targets. Really good sized targets on the other end. So I would imagine their passing game and his numbers will continue to grow as this season goes along, as his career does. We're catching him on the early side of it, and hopefully we can have our own level of success against him. But I would imagine he's going to have a good career and be a real big impact down there in Greeley.
Thanks, Coach.
Yeah, just one more. What have you seen from Callahan so far this season?
Callahan's been really steady. He's tackled the football well. I think we found in that will spot in this defense a real good home where he's generally playing in the box. So alignment and seeing things, his instincts can take over. But he's really, I think ran well and made plays sideline to sideline. He's blitzing probably more than he did before. I think he's been he's been effective there as well. So really pleased with his play. I know he gets overshadowed, I think, by Troy, but that tandem we've been really pleased with, and that's not just Troy making plays, it's the both of them.